We're with William Ramsay today, Deputy Secretary Director of International Energy Agency, IEA. Mr. Ramsay, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
When you're talking to the BRIC, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, are you more concerned with the energy and the consumption that they have, or the emissions from that consumption as an IEA?
If you go to these countries and say, we're concerned about your emissions, they're going to say, well, why don't you come back and talk to us later? Because right now we're concerned with growth. We want our people to have a better life. We want them to have a better house. We want them to have a job, an education. They want us to get those things for them. So
the national prosperity that Mr. McFarland
national prosperity. It's only logical. We're no different. So what you do is combine these two agendas. All right, fine. You can't really achieve energy efficiency, technology uptake, and other things if you're not a growing economy. So growth is the sort of sine qua non of any solution to anything. The growth gives you the economic power that you need to buy the better technology. You get the regulations in place so that the standards are higher for appliances, for automobiles, for housing, all the same things that we have to look at. You convince the authorities to put in place a rate structure for electricity so that the power generator can get compensated for putting in higher quality combustion. If you're going to put in a coal plant, put in an ultra supercritical coal plant. It costs more. You have to get that back from the rate base. It's not an easy thing, because when you're Hu Jintao and you say my challenge is to bring the rest of the Chinese people into the economic miracle of the coastline, it's hard for him to do when he's charging more for electricity. So these are tough policies to write. Those folks are aware of it. They are totally aware of it. They are aware of their responsibilities on the emissions side, but their first priority is growth.
It's interesting that you do say China. Some colleagues of mine were in Beijing, and they moved their offices to Shanghai because it was less smoggy. And one of the things that China is very concerned about is emissions, and they actually are looking at sequestering coal and making gas to liquid out of that. How close, have you heard about this? How close is the United States to doing it?
Well, you know, China has got a huge coal resource base, and they're thinking about security of supply as well. So while their oil imports are growing dramatically, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, they were self-sufficient. Now they're importing about a third. That makes them very alert to international markets. And so they're taking a hard look at coal as an option, which is a domestic fuel. Gas prices have gotten high. There they are. They're confronted with what shall we use to make our electricity. They know that that's very carbon intensive, twice as carbon intensive as gas. They know they can have a more efficient coal combustion sector. They are aware that coal to liquids, which would perhaps help them on the transportation side, is also very carbon intensive. Coal to liquids is not really a happy solution to dealing with the carbon dioxide greenhouse gas emissions. So they're looking at the options. They're looking at the technologies to see whether they can be improved. They're looking at better coal combustion, coal beneficiation programs, transmission issues, all the way down to the ultimate end-use consumer, all those things that we're looking at. And so that is why we in the IEA are spending a lot more time talking to the Chinese, talking to the Indians, because they're making a lot of important decisions now in infrastructure that we'll be living with for 50 or 60 years.
I just got in from Berlin, driving a BMW hydrogen gasoline internal combustion engine vehicle, 7 Series. In the United States, we're all looking for the way to make hydrogen. And one of the cleanest ways to make hydrogen would be nuclear. But we haven't had a single nuclear plant built in 30 years. How do we change the idea of nuclear plants in the United States? Should we be changing it? And what can we do about the spent waste that we already have?
Well, you put your finger on one of the key issues. The American people have evaluated nuclear power for decades. They've had a large nuclear park for a lot longer than most countries. We've had our 3 Mile Island, we've had our Chernobyls, we've had our anxieties expressed on the fact that the fuel cycle hasn't really been closed yet. We haven't found that we haven't demonstrated to the public's satisfaction that we have resolved high-level waste disposal, terminal disposal, or retrievable disposal. We haven't convinced our publics that nuclear power is sufficiently safe. Frankly, if you look at the record, it's much safer than coal, but we're not coal miners, and so we don't think about it. We have a public relations issue. We have some technology issues. If we can't satisfy our publics that nuclear power is an appropriate part of the mix and an expanding part of the mix, then we won't have it available. It is clearly the cheapest, cleanest way to generate hydrogen, because if you don't have nuclear power, you're generating it through fossil fuels. The only way you can do that is with a successful carbon capture sequestration technology, which we don't have at this point.
$22 billion has been given to the Department of Energy by the utility companies to get rid of this spent waste, and yet this spent waste is still laying around. It hasn't been put in Yucca Mountain, and it hasn't been recycled. So is there anything that we as Americans can do to say, let's figure this problem out? I mean, everybody pays to have their garbage taken care of.
Yeah, they do. They do, but if you can't find a tip somewhere, if you can't find a garbage dump, then it's going to collect. And for the time being, we haven't found an acceptable, politically acceptable place to store the high-level waste.
Can we recycle it?
You can recycle it, yeah, you can do that. You can extract the fuels from the spent rods and recombust those in, say, breeder reactors, but these are dangerous technologies. These are technologies that are prone to proliferation. We're already confronting difficulties in North Korea and Iran with the fact that technologies can lead to nuclear devices, and so we've got some balances to strike between the risks of a proliferation of dangerous technologies through the reprocessing, or a terminal waste program where we finally agree that a part of our backyard has to be used to store this waste, and we get past the political opposition to doing so.
Mr. Ramsay, thank you for your time today.
It's been my pleasure.